Rita Hayworth had 5 husbands, one of them a prince. She was the highest-paid actress in Hollywood, the face pinned to the atomic bomb tested at Bikini Atoll, and the woman an entire generation called the Love Goddess. But she had 2 daughters, just 2. And what those 2 girls actually went through, what they inherited, what they lost, and what was quietly taken from them, is a story almost nobody tells in full. A daughter whose newborn baby was taken from her before she could hold him, the adoption arranged by her own mother. A daughter who was technically a princess, but spent her 20s watching the most glamorous woman in the world forget her name. A grandson who discovered who his birth mother was, only to learn she was already dying and they would never meet. Another grandson found dead in a Manhattan apartment at the age of 25. Rita Hayworth's daughters did not grow up inside a love story. They grew up in the wreckage of one. And the damage did not stop with them. It passed forward into a generation that never asked for any of it. This is what happened to them. To understand what happened to Rita Hayworth's 2 daughters, you first have to understand what kind of life their mother was living and what kind of mother that life allowed her to be. Rita Hayworth was not born Rita Hayworth. She was born Margarita Carmen Cancino on October 17, 1918, in Brooklyn, New York, to a Spanish dancer father and a mother who had performed with the Ziegfeld Follies. Her father, Eduardo Cancino, put her on stage as a child and made her his dance partner while she was still in her early teens. By the time she was 18, she had been signed by Columbia Pictures, and the studio began the process of remaking her entirely. Her hairline was raised through years of painful electrolysis. Her black hair was dyed red. Her name was changed. The woman the world came to know as Rita Hayworth was a manufactured product, built by a studio system that treated its actresses as investments, not as people. Harry Cohn, the head of Columbia Pictures, controlled nearly every aspect of her professional life. He decided which films she made, which men she was seen with, and how she was presented to the public. Hayworth later said that she had spent her entire career being told what to do by men who saw her as property. And when the cameras stopped, her private life was no less chaotic. She married 5 times. Her first husband, Edward Judson, was more than twice her age and functioned as her manager. He helped launch her career and helped himself to her money. She later alleged that he had threatened her with physical harm to extract financial concessions during their divorce. Her second husband was Orson Welles, the most celebrated filmmaker of his generation, brilliant, consuming, and largely absent. Her third was Prince Ali Khan, heir to the spiritual leadership of 15 million Ismaili Muslims, glamorous, wealthy, and unfaithful from the start. Her fourth, the singer Dick Haymes, struck her in the face in public at the Coconut Grove nightclub in Los Angeles in 1955. Her fifth, the producer James Hill, lasted 3 years before it ended like the rest. Hayworth once said something about her life that has been quoted many times since, and it has been quoted because it is one of the most precise things any movie star has ever said about the gap between image and reality. She said that every man she had ever known had fallen in love with Gilda and woken up disappointed with her. Gilda was the role that made her immortal. The black satin glove, the hair toss, the song. But Gilda was not a person. Gilda was a performance. And the woman underneath it was someone who drank too much, who could not hold a marriage together, who would later be discovered to have been suffering from Alzheimer's disease years before anyone understood what was happening to her. The drinking, the confusion, the mood swings, the forgetting. For decades, the people around her called it alcoholism. It was not. It was a disease eating her brain from the inside, and nobody knew. 2 daughters were born into this life, one to Orson Welles, the genius who could not be bothered to pay child support, one to Ali Khan, the prince who died in a car crash when his daughter was 11. Neither girl got the mother the world imagined Rita Hayworth to be. They got the one who was left when the lights came down. Rebecca Wells was born on December 17, 1944, by cesarean section at a hospital in Santa Monica, California. Her father was Orson Welles. Her godfather was Frank Sinatra. She arrived into what looked, from the outside, like one of the most glamorous households in America. It was not. Orson Welles had wanted a son so badly that when his first wife gave him a daughter years earlier, he had named the child Christopher, the name he had already chosen for a boy. Rebecca was his second daughter, and while he posed dutifully for the fan magazines with Hayworth and the baby in the early months, his attention was elsewhere almost immediately. He was not a man built for domestic life. He was built for filmmaking, and filmmaking is what he chose. Welles and Hayworth divorced on November 10, 1947. Rebecca was 2 years old. Hayworth was awarded custody. Welles was ordered to pay $50 a week in child support, and for years he largely did not pay it. Hayworth eventually sued him for more than $22,000 in unpaid support. Rebecca's childhood was shaped not by filming schedules, but by marriages. Every time her mother married a new man, the household changed, the country changed, the school changed. She attended boarding schools in France, Switzerland, and California, and summer camps that moved her from continent to continent. She once remarked that the constant upheaval was not because her mother was filming in so many places. It was because she was married so often. In April 1954, something happened that briefly made the private reality of those two little girls' lives visible to the public. Hayworth had left 9-year-old Rebecca and 4-year-old Yasmin with a babysitter in New York, while she traveled to Florida with her fourth husband, Dick Hames. Neighbors reported that the older girl was not attending school and that both children were playing in trash on the street. The Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children investigated. The story appeared in the press. It was a glimpse behind the curtain that disappeared as quickly as it had arrived. Her father remained a distant figure. She saw him occasionally in Europe. In 1971, they appeared together in a Jim Beam bourbon advertisement, the most sustained time they had ever spent working on the same set. It was a commercial. That was what passed for closeness. At 19, Rebecca left a Christmas gathering in Madrid because she could no longer bear to watch her mother drink. She did not yet know that what she was watching was not alcoholism. She would not learn that for another 15 years. Rebecca enrolled at the University of Puget Sound in Tacoma, Washington, and studied theater, French, and English literature. She graduated and stayed. Tacoma was as far from Hollywood as a person could get while still remaining in the continental United States, and that appeared to be exactly the point. She was quiet, reclusive, and deeply private. She declined interviews. She held only one job briefly, as an assistant to a dentist. She did not seek the spotlight. She did not want the name. But before Tacoma, before the university, before the life she built in deliberate silence, something happened that Rebecca carried for the rest of her years. On March 31st, 1966, she was 21 years old. She gave birth to a son. Rita Hayworth arranged the adoption. Rebecca was not allowed to see her baby. She was not allowed to hold him. She woke up in a private room, and the child was gone. He was placed with a family in Montana named McKerrow, and they named him Marc. Orson Welles was never told he had a grandson. Rebecca married the sculptor Perry Mode in 1970 in a quiet ceremony in her living room, with only the required witnesses. They divorced by the mid-1970s. Around 2002, she married Guy Manning, a man she had known for decades. She lived with him in Tacoma until the end. Rebecca Wells Manning died on October 17, 2004. She was 59 years old. The cause was aggressive cancer. The date of her death was her mother's birthday. Her son, Marc, had only just discovered her identity through the courts. He had contacted her. A meeting was planned. The cancer moved faster than either of them could. They never met. Marc McKerrow was raised in Montana by a doctor and a school teacher who had adopted him at birth. He grew up believing he was theirs. He did not know that his mother was the daughter of Orson Welles and Rita Hayworth. He did not know that he had been taken from a 21-year-old woman who was never given the chance to hold him. He knew none of it. When Marc was 21, the same age his mother had been when she gave birth to him, he was in a car accident that caused a traumatic brain injury. The damage was severe. He struggled with violent outbursts that required intensive medical treatment. The life he had been building was disrupted in ways that would never fully heal. Years later, Marc petitioned the courts to open his sealed adoption file. What came back was a name he recognized from old movies and history books. His mother was Rebecca Wells. His grandmother was Rita Hayworth. His grandfather was Orson Welles. He had inherited the bloodline of two of the most famous people in the history of American cinema, and he had spent his entire life in Montana not knowing any of it. He contacted Rebecca. She was living in Tacoma. A meeting was arranged. But Rebecca was already dying. The aggressive cancer that would take her life moved faster than the reunion could. Marc McKerrow never saw his birth mother's face while she was alive. The first and only time he was in the same room with her was at her funeral. His story was told in the 2008 documentary Prodigal Sons, directed by his adoptive sibling, Kimberly Reed. The film followed Marc's search for his biological identity and the emotional wreckage of discovering a family that was already gone by the time he found it. Marc McKerrow died on June 18, 2010, at the age of 44. The cause was complications from a seizure disorder connected to the brain injury he had sustained 2 decades earlier. He was Rita Hayworth's only known grandson through Rebecca. He looked, by several accounts, remarkably like Orson Welles. And he lived and died without ever having been held by the mother who gave birth to him. Because Rita Hayworth, the woman the world called the love goddess, had arranged for him to disappear before Rebecca could open her eyes. Yasmin Aga Khan was born on December 28, 1949, at a clinic in Lausanne, Switzerland. Her father was Prince Ali Khan, the son of the Aga Khan III, and the heir to the spiritual leadership of 15 million Ismaili Muslims worldwide. Her mother was the most famous actress in the world. On paper, Yasmin was born into a fairy tale. In practice, the fairy tale lasted about 3 years. Ali Khan was charming, extraordinarily wealthy, and unfaithful almost from the beginning. Hayworth filed for divorce on September 2, 1951, on the grounds of extreme mental cruelty. The custody battle that followed was fierce and public. Ali wanted Yasmin raised as a Muslim in Europe. Hayworth refused. Ali offered $1 million if Hayworth would agree to raise their daughter in the Muslim faith from the age of 7 and allow her to spend summers with him. Hayworth rejected the offer publicly, saying there was no amount of money in the world worth sacrificing her child's right to be raised as a normal American girl. The divorce was granted in January 1953. Yasmin was 3 years old. She spent the hearing playing on the courtroom floor and at one point climbed onto the judge's lap. Despite the bitterness of the divorce, the relationship between her parents stabilized afterward. Yasmin spent summers with her father in the south of France and later described those visits with warmth. She said her earliest memories of her parents together were from when she was 8 or 9, and that theirs was a genuinely good relationship once the marriage was behind them. Then, on May 12, 1960, Ali Khan was killed in a car accident near Paris. Yasmin was 11 years old. The father she visited every summer was gone. She returned to her life with Rita in Beverly Hills. In some ways, it was surprisingly ordinary. Yasmin later described her mother teaching her to make her bed, keep her room clean, pick her clothes up off the floor. Rita was not performing motherhood for the cameras. She was doing the small, repetitive work of raising a child, and Yasmin remembered it with genuine affection. She told an interviewer in 2018 that her mother was just a wonderful mother. But the drinking was always there. Yasmin saw it clearly even as a child. She remembered thinking her mother was an alcoholic and that there was not much she could do about it. What she did not know, what nobody knew, was that it was not alcoholism. It was something far worse, and it had no name yet. Through the 1960s and 1970s, Rita's condition worsened in ways that baffled the people around her. She became repetitive. She grew confused. She could not remember things she had known for years. In 1971, she attempted a stage career that collapsed because she could not hold her lines. Her last film was in 1972. By 1976, the press was writing about Rita Hayworth stumbling off planes, disoriented and incoherent, and calling it the behavior of a woman who could not stop drinking. In 1980, Rita was finally diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. She was 62 years old. By then, she barely recognized her own daughter. Yasmin later described the moment Rita looked at her and asked, "Who are you?" She called it heartbreaking, and the word was not large enough for what it contained. In 1981, a Los Angeles judge declared Rita legally unable to care for herself. Yasmin was 31 years old. She became her mother's conservator. She moved Rita into an apartment adjoining her own at the San Remo on Central Park West and took over every aspect of her care. She managed the medication. She dealt with the aggression and the belligerence that came with the disease's progression. She fought to get her mother into the shower. She sat with a woman who had once been the most desired person on the planet and who now did not know where she was or who was holding her hand. When someone asked Yasmin how her mother was doing during those years, she gave an answer that is impossible to forget. She said, "She's still beautiful, but it's a shell." She described the period of caregiving as 2 decades of hell. She was not exaggerating. She had watched her mother disappear one faculty at a time. Memory first, then language, then recognition, then everything else, while the rest of the world still thought of Rita Hayworth as the woman in the black glove. On May 14, 1987, Rita Hayworth died in her New York apartment. She was 68 years old. The Alzheimer's had taken everything by then. Her memory, her speech, her ability to recognize the people who loved her. Yasmin was at her side. She had been at her side for 6 years. More than 500 mourners attended the funeral in Culver City, California. Both daughters walked behind the coffin. Rebecca had come from Tacoma. Yasmin had come from New York. They were photographed together. two women who shared a mother and almost nothing else. Yasmin chose the inscription for Rita's headstone. It read, "To yesterday's companionship and tomorrow's reunion." After the funeral, the two sisters returned to their separate lives. They were not close. They had grown up in different households, with different fathers, in different countries, shaped by different versions of the same woman. Rebecca went back to Tacoma and her silence. Yasmin went back to New York and the work that was already becoming her life's purpose. Rebecca had last visited Rita in the late 1960s. She described her mother as a warm person with a passion for living, but admitted that neither of them was much for writing letters. She had no way of knowing that what she had seen in her mother during those visits, the confusion, the erratic behaviour, the drinking, was Alzheimer's disease. The diagnosis did not come until 1980, more than a decade later. In 1983, Rebecca arranged to see her mother for the first time in 7 years. Orson Welles, when he heard about the visit, told a friend he was worried about the effect it would have on his daughter. He said that Rita barely knew him anymore. He had seen her 3 years earlier at an event the Reagans had held for Frank Sinatra, and she had not recognized him at first. The woman who had once been his wife, the mother of his child, had looked at him with beautiful, empty eyes. Rebecca saw her mother that day. What passed between them has never been recorded. She returned to Tacoma and did not come back to see Rita again before the end. After Rita's death, Yasmin did something that would have been easy not to do. She could have walked away from the disease that had consumed her mother and her own 20s and 30s. She could have reclaimed her privacy and lived quietly on the inheritance of a name that connected her to both Hollywood royalty and actual royalty. Instead, she turned directly toward the thing that had taken her mother and made it her life's work. She founded the annual Rita Hayworth Gala through the Alzheimer's Association. The first event was held in 1987, the year Rita died. It has been held every year since and has raised more than $75 million for Alzheimer's research and care. Yasmin became vice chairman of the Alzheimer's Association, president of Alzheimer's Disease International, and a spokesperson for the Boston University School of Medicine. She sat on the board of the Salk Institute. She used her name, the name that came with a title she had never asked for, to force a disease out of the shadows at a time when most people had never heard of it. In 2009, she appeared in a documentary called I Remember Better When I Paint, in which she described how Rita had taken up painting during her illness. Even as her mind was failing, Rita produced works of art that were vivid and beautiful. It was one of the few things the disease could not take from her, and Yasmin spoke about it with the particular tenderness of a daughter who had spent years searching for any sign that her mother was still in there. Yasmin had married Basil Embirikos, a Greek economist and shipping heir, in 1985. The wedding had been moved forward specifically because of Rita's declining health. The family wanted Hayworth to be present, while she still could be. Later that year, Yasmin gave birth to a son, Andrew Ali Aga Khan Embirikos. She brought the baby to Rita's apartment and talked to her mother while holding him. She was not sure if Rita understood what was happening, but she thought it was important to be there. Yasmin and Embirikos divorced in 1987. She married Christopher Michael Jeffries in 1989. That marriage ended in 1993.
Andrew grew up with every material advantage a young man could have. He attended Fordham University and earned a degree in psychology. He founded a charity group that provided clothing to homeless people in New York. He was involved with the Alzheimer's Association and with HIV/AIDS advocacy organizations. He was, by the accounts of people who knew him, charming and generous and deeply troubled in ways that were not always visible from the outside. On December 4th, 2011, Andrew was found dead in his apartment in Chelsea, Manhattan. He was 25 years old. He had struggled with addiction. He had made previous attempts on his life. A friend discovered him after he had failed to show up for several appointments. Yasmin, who had lost her father in a car accident at 11, who had watched her mother forget her name over the course of 2 decades, who had spent 6 years managing the daily reality of a disease that erased the person she loved most, now buried her only child. She was 61 years old. The grief that ran through her family had not stopped with her mother. It had reached forward, past Yasmin, and taken the next generation as well. 2 daughters, 2 different fathers, 2 completely different lives, and the same inheritance. A mother who was worshipped by the world and who could not give either of them what they needed most. Rebecca chose disappearance. She moved to Tacoma, declined every interview, built a life so private that her own obituary ran only a few lines in the local paper. She died on her mother's birthday at 59, having never held the son who was taken from her at birth. That son found her name in a court file just in time to learn she was already gone. Yasmin chose purpose. She took the disease that had erased her mother and turned it into a cause that has raised tens of millions of dollars and reshaped how the world understands Alzheimer's. She has spent nearly 4 decades doing the work that her mother's illness made necessary. And she has done it while carrying losses that would have broken most people long before now. Rita Hayworth once said that every man she knew had fallen in love with Gilda and woken up disappointed with her. Her daughters could have said something similar. They grew up with a mother the world wanted to believe was a love goddess, and found, behind the image, a woman who was struggling and ill and unable to hold her own life together. They did not get the mother the cameras saw. They got the one who remained after the performance ended. The damage did not stop with them. It moved forward. Rebecca's son grew up in Montana, not knowing who he was, and died at 44 without ever having met her. Yasmin's son grew up in Manhattan with every advantage his family could provide, and did not survive his 25th year. Rita Hayworth's story has been told as a Hollywood romance, as a tragedy of fading beauty, as a cautionary tale about fame. But the story of what happened to her 2 daughters, what they carried, what they lost, and what passed through them into the next generation, that is the one that tells you what fame actually costs when the credits roll. If this story stayed with you, please like and subscribe so you never miss another one.